Welcome to Judah's Roar Domestic Violence Awareness Initiative YouTube channel. I'm your host, Apostle Cheryl L. Richardson. Today's topic is when coercive control tactics masquerade as acts of devotion. When coercive control tactics masquerade as acts of devotion. Before we get started, I'm going to give you a couple of seconds. Check down here for the subscribe button. Make sure that you subscribe, then click the bell for notifications, and that way you'll be notified each week when we upload a YouTube premiere. We upload a new video every Sunday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, USA. Okay, thanks for taking the time to do that. Let's get started. We're going to look at a few definitions. Devotion is defined as the fact or state of being ardently dedicated and loyal, a feeling of strong or constant regard for and dedication to someone. Again, devotion is defined as the fact or state of being ardently dedicated and loyal, a feeling of strong or constant regard for and dedication to someone. A synonym or a few synonyms, words that mean the same as devotion, are affection, love, and fondness. Now remember, our topic is when coercive control tactics masquerade as acts of devotion. So we're talking about when coercive control tactics masquerade as affection, love, and fondness, when it masquerades or pretends to be ardently dedicated and loyal, when it pretends to have a strong feeling or constant regard for and dedication to, in this case, the victim. Okay, let's look at another definition, loyal. Loyal is defined as unswerving allegiance, such as faithful to a private person to whom faithfulness is due. Faithfulness to a private person to whom faithfulness is due. That's loyal. Now, words that mean the same as loyal are constant, steadfast, steady, and unfaltering. We're still talking about when coercive control tactics masquerade or pretend to be acts of devotion, when it pretends to be steady, steadfast, and unfaltering. Okay? When it pretends to acknowledge that faithfulness is due the victim in the relationship. Now, it's important to note that while these words mean a firm adherence to whatever one owes allegiance, the word loyal implies firm resistance. Don't miss this. Loyal implies firm resistance to the temptation to betray or abandon. So it doesn't mean that situations won't arise in a relationship in which one is tempted to betray or abandon. But true loyalty has a firm resistance in place to that temptation. And a person who is truly loyal to you will not betray you and will not abandon you. Okay, that's important. Let's keep going. Let's look at the word dedicated. Dedicated is defined as firm in one's allegiance to someone or something. Words that mean the same, synonyms, are constant, devoted, faithful, steadfast, steady, true, and true blue. Words that mean the opposite or are antonyms are faltering, hesitant. Now think about this when you think about your relationship. Faltering, hesitant, treacherous, unfaithful, fickle, unreliable, and untrustworthy. If your relationship can be described by any of those words, if treachery takes place, if unfaithfulness takes place, if the partner is fickle, they're for you one day, they're against you the next, they're unreliable, they're untrustworthy, they don't tell you the truth, then that is the complete opposite of being dedicated. It is the complete opposite of devotion, okay? But we're talking about coercive control tactics that masquerade or pretend. Now listen, victims often are invited to this masquerade ball, and they don't even know that's what it is. Their relationship is a masquerade ball, and they accept the invitation, and they don't even understand what is happening, that it's all a pretense, that it's a mirage, that it's a lie, okay? Now, what are some indicators? What are some indicators that your situation might be one in which coercive control tactics are pretending to be, they're masquerading as acts of devotion? Let's look at that. Number one, isolation from family and friends and support system. Now, this is a really tricky one because this can manifest in several ways within a domestic violence relationship. The isolation can occur because the abuser is belligerent, unwelcoming, unkind to the victim's friends or loved ones or support system or family. Or they can play mind games with the victim, convince them that um, the abuser is the only one that can understand them and that truly loves them, that it is you and me against the world. Nobody understands us. You understand me like no one ever has in my life, things like that. The other thing that can happen, though, is that they can exploit any fracture in a relationship that a victim has with a loved one or family member or someone in their support system. They will exploit the fracture, okay, make it greater, and thereby convince the victim to detach from their family or loved ones or support systems. This can be in response to a direct threat. If you continue to interact with them, I'm going to do something to them. Some harm is going to come to them, or some harm is going to come to you. Or it could be that they have manipulated the victim into breaking off relationships with those who have their best interest at heart. Okay. If I've said anything so far that applies to your relationship, you have accepted a ticket to a masquerade ball. Okay. Now, another one is destroying friendships and or reputations. Now, how's this done? Spreading rumors, spreading lies, saying that the victim said things that they didn't say, things that will be harmful to people that love them, um, things that will be disappointing to their family or to their loved ones, their support system. Okay, and this can be done on social media, and often it does take place on social media. That the abuser may post lies and rumors and innuendos and misleading statements. Um, or quote the victim out of context, or provoke the victim to say and do things that uh, contradict their own core values, their own core beliefs, and then broadcasting that they've done it. So once they exacerbate, escalate, provoke the victim, and the victim may respond out of hurt or despair or anger, and he or she may say things that they regret later. But what the abuser will do is then post this on social media or telegraph it to friends, make sure everyone knows about it. And then when the victim is asked about it, what do? Do you lie and say, no, it didn't happen? Or do you acknowledge it and then support the view that the abuser wants your support system to have of you? The bottom line is to get the victim isolated and alone, okay? To get the victim isolated, to keep things secret, to make the victim look crazy or out of control or as though he or she is the problem. Okay, so derogatory posts on social media. This can be done with the abuser being who they are, posting on their pages, on their timelines, or whatever. Or it could be that they've hacked into the victim's system and their platforms and is pretending to be them and saying and doing things that are derogatory or hurtful to others in an attempt, again, to further the isolation. Um, Here's another indicator. Occasionally, this is important, occasionally giving the victim what they want. Not always, every now and then. This is powerful because intermittent reinforcement is one of the most powerful forms of reinforcement that we encounter in life. Okay. The reason for this is that you don't always get what you want. And intermittent reinforcement is really the foundational piece for all forms of addiction, whether it be relationship, whether it be food, whether it's pornography, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol. You don't get what you want every time, right? You indulge. But every once in a while, you do. and you spend the rest of your time chasing that first experience, which is usually impossible to replicate. And so you've gotten on this hamster wheel now where you're trying to achieve that feeling of acceptance and support and love that you long for in a relationship. But you only get what you want every now and then. And that strengthens the bond to the abuser. And it's a key component in trauma bonding. Okay. And so it's important to know that all addictions have this intermittent reinforcement thing going on and is very, very present in domestic violence relationships. Okay, another tactic, another coercive control tactic that tries to masquerade as love and devotion would be micromanaging and making rules for the victim, deciding what the victim should eat at a restaurant or at home, deciding what a victim should wear and not wear. And I'm talking about beyond the suggestion, oh, that really looks good on you, but forbidding certain things to be worn, being very critical of the attire, being very critical of hairstyle, being very critical of weight, making rules for the victim. You can only eat this much. Um, Micromanaging, confiscating the victim's underwear. These things actually happen. Confiscating the victim's underwear. Okay. Now, another tactic is lack of privacy. Often, if victims stop and think about how they kind of move through their day, they'll realize that they have no privacy ever, 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 ever. I know that I experienced in the past that I could feel myself getting increasingly irritable and just feeling like all the oxygen was being sucked out of the room. And I couldn't pinpoint what was wrong. And it was affecting my moods, making me irritable. And I couldn't understand what was going on. And then it dawned on me one day that every single time I went anywhere at all, someone was in the car with me. Someone was in the car with me. It might be a child, it might be a cousin, it might be some distant random person that was a friend of the abuser, but I was never alone. And it took me a long time to even identify it. It took a long time to even identify. So often what abusers will do is they will manipulate those around you. They will suggest that someone goes with you in front of the person. So now if you say, well, no, I'll go by myself, you appear to be rude and obnoxious, right? And so the polite thing to do is say, well, okay, sure, come on and ride along. You end up never being alone, ever. Never being alone, ever. It's a miserable feeling, okay? So lack of privacy. This can go so far as to having doors removed from the hinges, the whole entire door removed from the bathroom, from the bedroom, from wherever the victim has a right to have some privacy. Wherever privacy is appropriate, it is often undermined. Okay, so that's another indicator. If this is occurring in your relationship, that you're in a relationship that is masquerading as a loving relationship, and it's really coercive control. Okay, manipulating, mind games, gaslighting. We've talked about that in previous videos. So feel free to look around on our channel for those videos. Withholding or the silent treatment. So we talked about how one tactic that is used is to kind of inconsistently, intermittently, occasionally give the victim what the victim wants or needs or desires. The flip side of that same coin is withholding. Being very, very strategic about when to withhold things from the victim. So you have the occasional granting of wishes and needs and desires, and you have the more frequent withholding. And so that intensifies that whole intermittent reinforcement thing that we talked about a few minutes ago. And also, it could take the form of the silent treatment, moving through the house, moving through the living space and not communicating, being sullen, but being lively and animated when visitors come by, being lively and animated in public. And then when you're back home, it's the silent treatment again. Okay, it's isolation within isolation is what it is. Okay. Now, Here's another thing that you may experience: loyalty test. Test of your loyalty. Test the victim may often be tested in regards to their loyalty to the abuser. One of the ways that may be used is to have a friend of theirs, a close friend of theirs, the abuser, to approach the victim inappropriately to see how the victim responds. Does the victim engage? Does the victim, rebuff the advances? Does the victim tell the abuser that their friend has done something inappropriate? And so, test of loyalty. And often they can convert flying monkeys into doing things for them. They don't even realize they're being used. Okay. Um, Another one would be not being allowed to go out alone. We talked about that. Like even for mundane things like grocery shopping, paying the bills. It doesn't matter. It could be a long trip. It could be a 5-minute trip to the corner store to get a bag of potato chips, and you can't go by yourself. That may be a stated rule, or it may be something that is formed around you and you don't realize it for a very long time that you're never alone. Okay. Stalking. When stalking occurs, it's been called homicide in slow motion. That's very, very serious. And if you are experiencing stalking, whether it's cyber stalking or in person stalking, I encourage you to reach out to a local advocate. Educate yourself, view our videos, understand that this is incredibly dangerous and often it escalates to homicide. Often it escalates to homicide. So it's not, oh, they're just concerned or they're jealous and they're keeping tabs on me or they want to make sure I'm safe or they know other people are interested in me and they're trying to protect me. It's dangerous, dangerous, dangerous behavior. And it often escalates to violence. And you're more likely to be harmed by someone who is stalking you that you actually know, that you've had a past relationship with or you're in a current relationship with. Okay. And then there's proxy stalking, which is enlisting someone else to do it. Get someone else to do it. Get someone else to keep tabs on you, and you don't even realize that you're being stalked. Okay, so not an uncommon tactic for abusers. And remember, they can use absolutely anyone. They can use your best friend. They can convert your pastor uh, a flying monkey if they're not educated and aware about the dynamics of domestic violence. And so often, flying monkeys think that they're helping and that they are acting in your best interest, but they're really being manipulated by the abuser. Okay? All right. What have we been talking about? We've covered a lot of ground. We've been talking about when coercive control tactics masquerade as acts of devotion, when they pretend to be uh, based in devotion and love, and they're not. Now, we've explored definitions for loyalty, for dedication, for devotion. And the reason that we did that is so that you would have something to compare your relationship to. All right. Um, for the victim, the behaviors that are utilized, the coercive control tactics that masquerade as acts of devotion are very, very damaging to the victim because ultimately it undermines their ability to discern what's truth from what's fiction. It undermines their confidence in themselves and it denigrates them. Their self-esteem is really, really impacted. Okay. For those of you who are people of faith, who describe yourself as spiritual people, I want to leave you with this thought. Proverbs 10 and 22 states, this is a New King James Version, the blessing of the Lord makes one rich, and he adds no sorrow with it. The blessing of the Lord makes one rich, and he adds no sorrow with it. Why am I leaving you with this thought? Because if when you examine your relationship, even if in the beginning you thought it was a blessing, and now it appears to be a straight curse, okay? God does all things well. He does all things well. If you're being denigrated, if you're being disrespected, if you're being abused financially, uh, sexually, emotionally, psychologically, physically, God did not orchestrate that relationship, nor did he condone it. And maybe you believe so at the time, but it's time for you to really consider that the word of God is true. He cannot lie. The blessing of the Lord makes rich, and he adds no sorrow with it. Thanks for spending time with us today. I'm Apostle Cheryl L. Richardson. You stay safe out there. Blessings to you.